Hello, fellow food enthusiasts. I'm Angela Taylor, the owner and Chief Indulge Officer at Indulge Boise. And it is my absolute pleasure to welcome you all to Culinary Chats with Indulge Boise here on YouTube. Similar to the culinary experiences that we are trying to curate with Indulge Boise, where we talk about the food, the architecture, the history, the cultural scene, the public art that's on display in downtown Boise and adjacent neighborhoods. What we're hoping to do here on Culinary Chats with Indulge Boise is to kind of take you all on a delectable journey through Boise and really all of Idaho's culinary landscape. You know, Talking about the brilliant minds that are shaping the evolution of the food scene here in Idaho. From the innovative chefs to the visionary restaurateurs to really just passionate brewers and dedicated farmers, like throughout the ecosystem and the supply chain, we're trying to unlock and uncover the heartbeat of the culinary movement that is really has me excited about what's happening here in Idaho. So I hope for the next half an hour or so that you all will just settle in and join us as we reveal some of these stories and the voices and the personalities and personas that are really breathing life into the culinary scene and this vibrant community that you and I all are able to enjoy. So this is not only going to be a little bit of a feast for the palate, but also some food for thought and some soul enriching conversations. So I'm looking forward to being conversation today. Want to talk about visionaries, those individuals who have taken their ability to be creative and innovative and really elevate what's happening in the food scene here in Boise and beyond. And so I'm really excited today to be in conversation with the founders and owners of The Still, The Sweetest Things in Life, Casey Allen and Dan Sell. So Casey Allen and Dan Sell started The Still in 2016 when these two aspiring entrepreneurs who were working in the tech industry came together. Dan, who's a Cleveland, Ohio native, casually asked Casey, a born and raised Boisean, where he could take his kids for unique Boise ice cream. A place where creative flavors made from fresh local ingredients would satisfy the entire family. Well, Casey didn't have an answer, and the two jokingly said to each other, maybe we should just create that. 10 months later, The Still opened its doors to the public in July of 2017. In less than a year, they were voted as Boise's best dessert. Their unique concept, fun atmosphere, and delicious ice creams have amassed over 1,000 five-star reviews across digital platforms and earned them several national media spotlights, including appearances in the Washington Post, Chicago Tribune, Sunset Magazine, Today.com, Forbes, and many more. Thank you all for tuning in today to Culinary Chats with Indulge Boise as we share some food for thought and a soulful conversation with Casey Allen and Dan Sells from The Still. Casey and Dan, welcome to Culinary Chats with Indulge Boise. There you are. Welcome to the screen and to the show. How are you both doing?
Doing well.
Doing
Yourself?
great, Angela. Hi.
Awesome. So great to see you. I feel like, in COVID, as everyone was kind of operating in their bubble, we just didn't get a chance to see each other quite as often. So it's a pleasure. I know that one of the things that I've enjoyed about our partnership and collaboration and having you both as partners with Indulge Boise and our tour experiences is running into you in random places in downtown Boise or in your venues. But now you have a zillion venues in places around Boise. And so don't get the pleasure of running into you as much. But thank you for joining us on Culinary Chats. Today, I would love to start off with, and I think the story is fascinating, is just the origin story. Just mentioned it in your bio, but Dan, when you came to Casey and said, where's this unique ice cream place that we can go to? Did you know in that moment that you had such a fresh, magical idea and concept that you can bring to life?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. Like it's one of those things. You don't know if you're rewriting history when you go and think back on it. In fact, I looked up. It was a summer night in August, and I think I was genuinely just looking, where to go because we had been to a few places and just weren't satisfied. It wasn't what I grew up with. So but there was that thought in the back of your mind because we had actually been working on an app we were calling Caddy. It was for golf instructors in terms of like tracking how they each lesson with their students, and we were actually kind of discussing that. So that entrepreneurial kind of, I guess, mindset was there. And I think, it's one of those questions, and I'm sure like every entrepreneur has that aha moment, right?
Mm.
Um, and I think just that very question of, and the absence, and ice cream, we'd like to think it's we're unique, our concept is unique, but the idea of ice cream is not unique, right? It's a pretty old concept, old proven concept. So it's pretty easy to kind of iterate on that and then do what we do best in terms of just our business minds and just take and launch that.
Well, Casey, from your perspective, like, how did this moment come about? Were you anticipating, after having a caddy app, right, that was what was on the table at the time? Did you envision that this still would be able to come to life?
Yeah, I mean, I guess, first of all, thanks for having us on, Angela. It's great to see you. And honestly, if you had told me we're coming up on 6.5 years or so now, but if you had told me 8 years ago, I guess that, I'd be in the ice cream industry, that we'd be in the ice cream industry, there's no way I would have thought that would have happened. Like Dan said, we met, we, as we like to joke, realized we were the same idiot, 15 years apart, and kind of had some synergy in terms of our skill sets and what we were interested in terms of entrepreneurship, and kind of took the path, both being in the tech industry at the time of, maybe we should create software, maybe we should create an app. And when Dan kind of broached that subject of like, hey, where's the local ice cream spot? If we go eat dinner downtown, where do I take my kids afterwards? Um, at the time, it didn't seem like a business pitch to me by any means. It was more just like him scratching an itch, of hey, I love to go out and get ice cream with my kids, and there doesn't seem to be a spot for local ice cream around. We have the usual suspects of, Cold Stone, Ben and Jerry's, kind of those chain ice cream places. But he was looking for something unique to Boise because he had experienced that in Cleveland and in, Columbus, and his wife being from Louisville, and each of those, towns or cities kind of had that. And so coming to Boise, he's looking for, and I was like, I don't know. And to me, it felt like a joke initially, like, oh, maybe we could do that, like neither. I think Dan was, correct me if I'm wrong, Dan was like a busser at a Boston market when he was in high school, and collectively that was the only
Yeah.
culinary or restaurant experience that we had combined, was Dan working at a Boston market, 20
Actually chopped
years
up
prior.
chicken. I was a chicken
Oh,
chopper.
okay, I thought you were a busser. Yeah.
Boston Market
I could,
was
I could like,
legendary. Like,
oh yeah, I
there's
could
Yeah.
quarter a chicken in like under 10 seconds.
I didn't know that, but hey,
Oh
yeah,
yeah. Yeah.
learn every day. So, not having any idea of what it would take, or, having worked in food, the reason we were working on a golf app is because that's what I had done my whole, life, as I worked at golf courses and was, played golf and all that. So going from being kind of a subject matter expert in something to like, we have no idea even where to start,
Right.
didn't really seem like a plausible path to success, right off the bat. But I think, we've kind of always approached this whole business thing from this aspect of, A, we're very interested, we love business, um, but B, just kind of like, we can figure it out, and that was sort of our mantra going forward, is like, we can figure this out. It can't be that hard or that, inaccessible. Like, we can figure it out as we go. So, definitely a fun origin story. We're proud of how quickly we were able to go from like that initial conversation to opening our first location. And from there, it's obviously, there's we've done something right, I guess.
well, I love, Casey, that you went there and had this sort of compare contrast to the tech space. Because when we think about innovation and creativity and entrepreneurship, we oftentimes go to the digital space or to technology, and we don't necessarily think about food or the food ecosystem. And I love this synergy that you all discovered, things that made you very successful in the tech space, are applicable, I would assume, in the space that you're currently occupying. And so I wonder, as you took a look at the food space, what I love about my friends that are in technology, they oftentimes talk about, version 1.0 is better than version none, right? Just try and fail, like, right? You can continue to figure out the bugs along the way and to perfect it. It doesn't have to be perfect right away, but as entrepreneurs, oftentimes you have an idea and people wait to actually launch that idea until it is perfect. But I wonder how much of your tech background allowed you to try and fail quickly, fail fast, fail forward, and move on to that launch.
Yeah, I think
Yeah.
Casey and I always joked. So in the rest, it's a little different. You can have that 1.0, but the 1.0 has got to be in the back, right? It can't be in the front to the customer. That's the one thing where, like, if you do an app, you can kind of, there's the old saying, you should be embarrassed of your first version of your app, right? You should be embarrassed looking back on it. But when it comes to the kind of the restaurant space, you get one first impression, right? So that up front, you have to be a little more prepared. You can't just go in it haphazard. There can be little things like we look back on our menu and we laugh. We had, I don't know, 9 flavors or whatever. We have 24 now.
Wow.
So there's little things, and there's a story when Casey tried to give a pint away in a 16-ounce drinking cup with press and seal on the top. I mean, it was like
Use what you can find, right?
yeah, it was.
Well, yeah.
It's that mindset, but you got, do what you have to do
We're
to
trying
get
to please the
done.
customer.
Yeah.
Please the customer. And she looked at, she was like, "What is this? This is no, thank you." So there is that front of house. You have to make that good first impression, but the back of the house can be on fire, right? As long as the customer doesn't see the smoke that's in the back,
Right.
and you're golden, right? And that's kind of always been our philosophy, is to, like, let's move fast and analyze, and move fast and analyze, right? Different products, different placements of ads or whatever. But from the customer's perspective, you want that consistency and that good service. And that's, I think, what may have been, along with timing, like, it was a unique time that there was no other ice cream. And now I think we have 2 or 3 other competitors or whatever in the market. So it was kind of a unique time of us being first to market. But I think the driver's success is kind of our service model.
Mm.
We kind of brought that. The still is like, the name, it's Sweetest Things in Life, but also calls back to, we serve alcohol. It's kind of that bartender barista mindset of, what do you want? What can I do to please you? Where a lot of the old school ice cream was just like, what flavor do you want? And then scoop it and be like, you're done. You're right. So it's kind of the service model is a little different. But yeah, I mean, there is that, we do have that mindset of just go, go, go and get it done. But it's more on the, it's definitely so the customer can't see it.
Right. Well, and I think
Yeah.
that that's important too, that service mindset. And that's been my experience with the still is, when I was in sports and entertainment, working with the NBA and the WNBA for a long time, we talked about, like, it's not just about the game experience when somebody's sitting in their seat watching the 48-minute game or the 40-minute game, however long it is. It's when they leave their house, and whether they get in their car and drive to the arena and look at parking until they get back to their house, or
Right.
if they get an Uber, like, right, it's that wall-to-wall experience. And when I think about the still, I think you all have captured that. Is my experience as a customer and as a partner is, every time I come to the still, the venues are immaculate, right? The decor is welcoming, whether it's the patio, indoor, outdoor spaces. Your staff is engaging, and super helpful and trying to help you with, putting the pairings together. Like, tell us a little bit about the intentionality. Like, how do you actually, you can say that's what you want to create, but how do you actually bring that to life with part-time staff or seasonal staff or staff that is constantly in flux?
For sure. Yeah. Well, I mean, first of all, thank you. That's great to hear. That's certainly what we've aimed to do. We talk a lot internally about being in the experience industry, right? Like, we are aware, obviously, ice cream is the product that we serve. Ice cream is what we're sort of known for. We have beer and wine, and we have, the other elements that kind of pull together our full concept. But at the end of the day, we are in the experience business, right? And the goal for us is for customers to walk in and have a great experience. And if they have a great experience, then hopefully they're going to want to repeat that experience. They're going to want to share that experience with others. They're going to want to talk about it, right? And that's how ultimately we are able to continue to grow and expand and be successful and do what we want to do with the Stills brand and concept. And so a lot of that comes down to, you know, this is like my spiel that I give to every new interviewee or new hire, right? Is it's like, to us, there are three elements to that experience. It's about the product, it's about the service, and it's about the atmosphere, right? And if we nail those three elements, if we have a great product in a great atmosphere with great service, then I think that the experience will kind of take care of itself. And so, yeah, I mean, when we set out to create the Still, one of our, you know, obviously you kind of model yourself around other things and look around there. And so, you know, obviously inspiration came from Jenny's, or inspiration came from Salt and Straw, and some of those other ice cream companies that are in larger cities that are a little bit ahead of us in terms of their growth trajectory. And so, you know, if you go to Portland or Seattle or San Francisco or Cleveland or whatever, there's always those, oh, you got to go here, right? You have to go check out, here's the list of the 5 to 10 things that if you're going to go and you're a tourist in this city, here's where you have to go check out for food or drink or ice cream or whatever. And so as we set out to kind of curate the experience, especially of our first store in downtown Boise, the goal was, we want to be one of those places for Boise, right? We want to be on the short list of, you're going to Boise for the weekend, go to the Still. You know, that's one of you're going to go to these 7 places, and we want to be on that list. And at the end of the day, you know, we can only do what we can do to put ourselves in position to be that. And, you know, the market decides, right? Like, we don't have any control over whether we become one. We have some control because we can just do our best to position ourselves as such. But at the end of the day, you know, you execute on it, and then the market decides if you are that place or if you're not that place. I think we're fortunate that hopefully, for the most part, we are one of those places, and you know, we don't take that honor lightly. Like, we strive to continually make sure that the experience is in the place that we want it to be. But I think it's just internally continually harping on, you know, product, service, and atmosphere, and making sure that people are stepping into a space that has, you know, to Dan's point about that more sort of bartender mentality from how we train our staff, to make sure that, you know, hey, we recognize that we are not your traditional ice cream store, right? We don't have Rocky Road. We don't have cookies and cream. We don't you know, those butter pecan, those flavors that maybe people grew up with and are walking in, they already know what their favorite kind of ice cream is. We don't necessarily have that, because we try to be unique but accessible with our menu creation. So making sure that our staff is able to sort of walk people through that experience and make sure that folks are trying flavors and walking out of there with something that they've maybe never had as an ice cream, but that that's going to be memorable for them, and that they're, you know, going to ultimately be really excited about whatever they end up choosing, and the kind of upbeat, positive atmosphere that they're stepping into. You know, I think a lot of it is leading by example, right? And kind of curating the atmosphere that we want to, you know, embody for our customers, and just kind of trying to keep it light, keep it fun, and hire the right people, and make sure we treat them well, so that ultimately that translates to the customer. And at the end of the day, they walk out of there and they say, hey, that was awesome. I want to go leave a review. I want to go, you know, take my family here next time they visit, or talk about that to my friends because it was awesome.
Well, it has to be incredibly rewarding to know that, right? Again, these concepts are brought to life by staff and team members on a regular basis. And I want to get back to the flavors here in a moment. But Dan, I'll invite you to spill the tea a little bit. You know, for Indulge, when I got ready to launch this food tour, I felt compelled to go to different places, San Francisco, Chicago, Oakland, and take food tours to see what those experiences were like. Now, with you and Rachel and Casey, like, did you guys have to travel to other places to sample ice cream on a regular basis? And how do I sign up for that job in the future, to get an idea of what you wanted to be able to create?
Yeah, we didn't. That's funny, because we didn't really like travel around. Casey and I did go to a convention that National Ice Cream Retailers Association
Really?
convention back, and just kind of talk with a lot of those folks. And we had some very productive conversations. We also had some unique conversations, such as a guy telling us all we had to do was put a piece of pineapple in something, we could say it had fruit in it. It was just a tidbit,
Just one
as he
tidbit.
referred to
Just
it.
one tidbit.
Just one tidbit, and you could say it has fruit in it. So that was kind of, but we had obviously some good conversations, and that was more from the operational side. The flavor side it's kind of unique. So a lot of the original flavors were things either I made in my kitchen as test batches, and things, we still carry it, vanilla with cream cheese. The after school special was actually a flavor I made for my wife's birthday, because she used to make no bake cookies after school.
Mm.
The Mexican chocolate was something I made originally. And then there's Deja Vu, which Casey threw together accidentally, and it was just kind of born out of things that we had lying around. Our process is a little different nowadays. There is that factor of like, if one of our managers goes and visits an ice cream shop and they're like, oh, I really like this flavor, we'll kind of think about it and be like, okay, do we want to copy that? Do we want to put our own spin on it? Right. We have no shame for copying. Like the ice cream business, it's one of those like proven things that like sometimes you just copy, and like it's still unique because it's our machines are gelato machines instead of traditional ice cream machines, so the flavor's a little more dense. There's less air in it, and the texture is a lot more creamy. So it's because of less air, the ice crystals are smaller. The creaminess is much higher on the scale. So there is that factor. So even if we're making a chocolate derivative or brownie batter, the texture is different. But sometimes you don't want to reinvent the wheel, and sometimes we do. One of my personal favorite flavors right now is a nightcap on Eckert, and that flavor actually came from a competition we ran with the staff regarding who could sell the most pints during we have our pint promotion now. We're doing it again. You get
Pint deal.
4
Buy
pints
3,
for the
get
price.
1 free.
Buy 3, get 1 free.
All right, nice.
So,
Buy 3, get 1 free. Okay, I'm there.
Buy 3, get 1 free right now. We usually run it all the way through January.
Okay.
Helps keep their forearms in shape for summer for scooping. But like the staff at our Harris Ranch store won, and they put together this flavor, and it has, what is it? It's a Kahlua.
Yep.
And
Kahlua, chocolate cake,
and Heath
espresso, and
pieces.
Yeah.
And it's just awesome. If that, and you pair that with a Ghost Town Porter, it's unbelievable. That's good stuff. That's living right there. So, the flavors kind of come from different places. It's originally it was just like Casey and my wife Rachel and myself just kind of putting together, okay, what do we need? We did it was funny. Brownie batter came from one of the gals who named Elena, and she worked for us, and we realized we didn't have a chocolate. And she's like, I have a brownie batter recipe. And we're like, let's see that. And so she made it originally, and we had to tweak it because it had too much sugar and was a little melty and stuff. But, some of the flavors come from necessity and some come from planning.
Very cool. I love that.
Yeah.
That process. When you mentioned that you were a little bit different from ice cream, I remember when you first opened, there was a machine issue. If you talk about behind the scenes that no one knows, right, that actually led to the texture being different and you enjoying that texture a little bit. But do you want to talk about the process and the American gelato, if you will, concept that I know you guys threw around a little bit as well, that it is a very different texture. It is creamy and again, enjoyable. Like sometimes you have ice cream that doesn't even taste like ice cream. It tastes like ice with some cream in it. But certainly the ice cream at the still is a little bit different.
Yeah. Sure. I'll let Casey jump in, but when we went to Nicro, they had some machines, and we kind of got talking with these folks, and we ended up their supplier was based out of Italy, and we wound up buying the machine. And then when we got it, we realized we bought a gelato machine. But once you spend $32,000 and it comes in a crate and it's sitting there, there's not really something you put a stamp on, you send it back. So you're like, okay, this is where we are now. So how do we, where do we go from here? And it turned out to be one of those like serendipitous mistakes.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's awesome. That's awesome.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I know if you listen to like How I Built This, the podcast at all, at the end, Guy Raz always asks, you know, what percentage, and sorry if I'm stealing a question in the future, but what percentage would you say is luck and what percentage would you say is skill, right? And I think that was one of those moments where you just kind of luck into certain things. And I think, you know, the timing of when we opened, you know, the serendipitous moment of kind of getting an Italian made gelato machine instead of more of an American hard scoop ice cream machine, all those things kind of add up to this, like, whatever that combination is of luck and skill, right? And so just to speak to our ice cream in general and kind of what makes it stand out from our competitors, or, you know, why we, if you haven't tried it, why you know you should, and kind of see the difference, right? There's um it is kind of a perfect hybrid between gelato and ice cream and American ice cream. And to your point, sometimes you do order ice cream and or you get some at the grocery store and it kind of has that very airy texture, or it is like a little grainy or icy. And then, you know, anyone who's been to Italy, I have not, but for people who have, right, that they're like, why is gelato so dense and kind of creamy and rich, and right? And Dan kind of alluded to this earlier with air, but there's sort of two elements that go into that. There's the overrun, which is the amount of air that's kind of churned into the final product. Right. So American hard scoop ice cream, your traditional ice cream that you might buy in a grocery store, that could be any up to 100% air. Right. So you take the starting volume of the liquid mixture, right, and then you what you end up with on the other end when it's done, that like kind of higher speed churn is whipping just a bunch of air into the product. So ice crystals further apart. That's what gives it that kind of, you know, more airy texture, if you will. Um, Whereas gelato, much less air. It's usually that very slow churn process. Ice crystals much closer together, and gives that more dense, rich, creamy final product. And then the other element of differentiator between gelato and ice cream is the butterfat content. So gelato is typically lower in butterfat content, 4 to 8%, whereas ice cream is, you know, 10% on the low end, up to, you can, you know, you sometimes see up to 19%. Um, and so ours kind of marries the best of both worlds, right? We use an ice cream butterfat content, you know, an ice cream mixture, right? So we're 16% butterfat content, but then because we are using that Italian made gelato machine and kind of churning the ice cream as if it were gelato, we're getting that lower overrun, less air, creamy, dense product. So I think it makes for a very unique, uh, you know, creamy ice cream that people, you know, if you compare it to what you're used to getting, you'll definitely notice quite a difference in terms of the quality and just the texture, the creaminess, the richness of it. And you know, it's definitely a product that we're super proud to serve. And going back to the experience element, you know, having great products is, you know, a huge driver of what we try to do, from crafting that experience for customers.
Yes, and good any time of the day, right? Breakfast, it's like having milk and cereal. Lunch, it's a nice like a snack in the mid afternoon, and it's certainly a after
Yeah.
dinner dessert. So, for
It's
those
got
of us, you
got
know,
protein, carbs, sometimes
exactly,
fruits, sometimes vegetables.
yeah, yeah, very
It's
absolutely.
a whole meal.
That's what I keep telling myself when I stop in and just have to have a single scoop or something like that.
That's right.
But what, you know, I want to make sure that we also discuss is, you know, from that summer of 2017 to where you are now, there's been an immense amount of growth um, in at the still. And so, what does the enterprise look like now? Like, what all is entailed under the umbrella of the still?
Sure. Me? You? I'll
You
start
can
and then
go.
you chime
You
in.
can
Yeah.
start. Yeah.
Yeah.
We
So
have
we
elephants
now
now.
have they juggle, a juggling
Yeah,
Yes,
elephant.
what's on the
juggling
elephant?
elephants.
Nice.
Yes. So we have expanded to, we just opened our fifth location. And so the downtown Boise store was our original spot. It's you know, 8th and Broad in the heart of downtown Boise. And then we opened in Harris Ranch, is kind of southeast part of Boise, in 2019. We opened our current production facility up on Latah, so the Boise Bench. We opened there in the summer of 2021, and that is kind of, you know, 1,500 square feet is where all the ice cream is made, and you know, our whole production facility. And then about 500 square feet is a scoop shop, and you know, we share the outdoor patio with Wild Child and Push and Pour up there are great neighbors that created a really cool community space up there. And then we opened in Caldwell in the winter of 2021, December 2021 on Indian Creek Plaza. And then we just opened in downtown Nampa, Dan, about a week and a half ago,
Yep.
on the corner of 1st and 13th. So kind of right on that main strip where the Nampa restaurants are. Just opened that store. So that's kind of our store footprint at this point. We have a couple more stores on the horizon for next year. So hopefully we'll be in the 6, 7, or 8 strong if we talk again in about a year, but kind of updates to come on that front. And then we do wholesale as well. Handful of grocery stores, restaurants, shops, hotels, things like that. So, you can find our products at the Boise Co-op, the Albertsons Broadway, Albertsons Market Street, things like that. And yeah, we're just kind of continuing to grow and expand and explore options. We're interested in potentially moving out of the state and looking at other locations that might make sense for us in the near future, as well as continuing to grow where it makes sense in the Valley and in Idaho as well. So, Dan, take that wherever you want to take it in terms of the enterprise, as Angela called it.
We might vertically integrate some operations. We got a bunch. Casey and I have there's always shiny objects, right? And it's the key of like narrowing these shiny objects down to like things that you should do instead of things that you want to do. But it is funny to look back because originally, and maybe some of your listeners have been to our store downtown. That is where, when we first started out in that 923 square feet with 2 bathrooms, right? And a dining room. And that's where we made everything. We were making everything for that store and then the Harris Ranch store. And we also had our wholesale accounts. So it was quite the circus.
Benny Hill music just constantly played in the background.
Benny Hill.
Benny Hill on repeat.
Like bumper cars, right? As you're running into each other.
Yeah, talk about the back of the house being on fire, like Dan said earlier. That was,
I mean, you want to go all the way back to the beginning. Casey and I, we would shut the store down and clean it up, and we'd go home at like 1 or 2 in the morning, and then we'd be back in the shop at 7 in the morning making ice cream again because we were low on product because we were a lot more popular than we thought we were going to be at first. I remember when we first ordered cups and we had 5 pallets delivered to my garage, much to my wife's chagrin. 5 giant pallets, and we're like, man, that's going to take a while to go through all those, and like we flew through those cups, in the first couple months, and that's kind of when we knew we had something. But it's funny now we have that nice production facility at Latah, but we're looking at that and we're like, oh man, we're gonna grow out of that here soon. So it's like there are these growth, these problems, good problems are still problems. So we're trying to decide like how do you grow properly without, out kicking your coverage, without, stretching your culture too fast or stretching your management ability too fast, right? So that's kind of where we're at. We're definitely where the olden days, all of 7 years ago, it was more like taking things as they come, like, oh, there's this and that. Now we're, a little more thought out, or at least we'd like to think we're a little more thought out. We still make interesting decisions where we're like, oh, I can't believe we did that. That was dumb. But like trying to plan out the future a little more. So that we're pretty excited about things we have in the hopper, and hopefully our customers will be too.
Well, and Casey, I'm curious. Oftentimes when you were thinking about entrepreneurs or small business owners, you either work on the business or in the business, right? And early on, you're doing it all. But as you guys continue to grow the enterprise, have you been able to work more on the business from the strategic lens, or are you still finding yourself in the business?
No, absolutely. We're fortunate to have had, some great people work for us over the years, and a number of those have been with us for quite a while, so they can assist with the in the business stuff and kind of help us take a step up and not be so in the weeds. At the same time, there are elements that are important to stay in the business, right? And so it's kind of finding that balance of what's the right balance of being in the business enough so that we're not, out of touch or not, losing track of kind of what's made us successful, but also spending that adequate time on the business so that we can continue to look forward and see what's next and where are we going, and kind of what are our plans moving forward. So it's definitely a balance, and over time it's been a, nothing as fast as it seems like our growth has gone, right? Nothing ever goes as fast as you would like. It's always a little bit slower moving than you want. And I think maybe, from the outside perspective, you can see and you can say, wow, the Still's really grown so quickly over since it started. But sometimes internally we're like, man, this is moving so much slower than we want it to move. And so I think, we can look back and we can say, even a couple of years ago, and certainly 6 years ago, we are working so much more on the business than we are working in the business. And that's amazing. And the hope is to continue to be able to work on the business, and kind of empower those managers and those folks to be more in the business while making sure that they still feel supported and they still feel like, we are knowledgeable and have their interests in mind as well. And so it's kind of that balance. We talk a lot about with our managers and everything. There's some portion of your day and your week that is going to be proactive, and we should continually strive to be more and more and more proactive. But in the industry that we're in, we're in the food and beverage industry, we're in the culinary world, and we're open 363 days of the year, right? And so there's going to be some part of your day and your week and your month that's going to be reactive, and it's just that's the nature of it, right? We are in the service business, we're in the service industry. It's weekends, it's evenings, it's holidays, and we're primarily employing college age kids that have social lives and want to go home for holidays and all those other things. So it's always about on the business side, understanding that we need to work on the business and not in the business, but making sure that we stay balanced so that we don't lose track of kind of what's been able to get us here and make us successful at the same time, and finding that balance between being proactive and looking towards what we want to do and the growth trajectory that we want to take on, and then making sure that a part of your calendar is reserved for those reactive things that just inevitably show up, right? So long-winded answer to your short question, but it's definitely nice for us to be able to sit down and talk about that strategy piece and say, like, okay, let's look at all these shiny objects and decide, do we want to open this location? Do we want to take advantage of this opportunity? We have been approached many times about, I want to open a franchise location in this place, right? And it's not something that we're interested in doing at this point in terms of like franchising our concept. And so, but you have all this inbound in terms of those shiny objects that you need to carve out that time to be working on the business. And that's, it's important to have the right people on the bus and the right seats, right? To be able to work in the business as well for you, and that you can kind of trust and that really get what we're trying to do. And finding that balance is always the trick of entrepreneurship and small business, right?
That really is. Well, and I appreciate you sharing that. And one of the things that, and I think I'd mentioned this to you in the past, is just observing, right, from a distance as another entrepreneur, like how you both have been able to partner and collaborate around this, right? Like it is not easy. And it sometimes can be challenging on friendship relationships. But just the task of like not just getting stale, of thinking that yesterday's success will lead to tomorrow's success, but that constant figuring how do you iterate, and I think that you very well articulated it is a balance. And sometimes as entrepreneurs and creatives, there's something that you're passionate about, and as you build a business, you get further and further away from the thing that you actually enjoy doing. So how do you make sure that you're still able to be involved in that aspect of the business? How do you also help your team develop and evolve and grow so that you can scale a business? And so, understanding the nuances and how you balance on the business versus in the business as entrepreneurs is critical, and leads to that critical path for growth and scalability.
Yeah.
Well, I commend you both for again how you have built this enterprise. I'm going to keep using enterprise with this still, and I would love to, as I do these interviews, whether it's on this show, Culinary Chats, or podcasts, or just conversations with leaders, I get curious of not just what you do, but who you are, who you've had to be as individuals and collectively to be able to elicit such success. So I'm going to kind of switch it up a little bit here and have you talk about each other. So Dan, I would love for you to say, like, what is it, who is Casey, and that has allowed you as partners to be able to create this enterprise? And then Casey, I'll go to you the same thing about Dan.
I feel like we're like a relationship counselor, and I can just rant.
Exactly.
We're only good. I'll just do only the good things. Okay. Now, so it is funny. Like, our mindsets are very similar in terms of how we think about problems and we approach problems in life in general. So I think that makes our partnership easy. People are like, how many, we don't argue a whole lot, or if we do, it's never like a knockout drag out. It's just like a discussion where one of us maybe gets a little frustrated, but we kind of walk through and iron that out. But our personalities are pretty opposite in terms of, like, so I'm much more introverted. I grew up in the finance, development world where I'm just behind a computer punching out spreadsheets or punching out code, and that I do presentations to management. I'm uncomfortable with that, but I prefer to just be in a quiet coffee shop by myself with my headphones in, and just jamming. Where Casey is much more that type A, for lack of a, like, say, the salesman, personality, like just being open and being able to, market the business. And I think that's kind of why. So when we're gonna go back, like, when Casey first, he was a 25-year-old, and I was a almost 40-year-old man with 3 kids. So we're very much opposite when we first started this journey. And people, that was the question I got, like, why did you partner with him? And one of the main things is, or main things I should say, is, one, he worked his butt off, right? Really hard worker. 2, he knew a lot more about marketing and advertising and branding than I did. So that kind of like filled a gap that I had in my kind of entrepreneurial journey. And 3, he was mature and kind of like wise beyond his years, right? It's just like a guy whose career was, had been kind of short up until then. You would have thought he'd been working for 20 years with what kind of he brought to the table in terms of like his knowledge and how he approached problems and how he approached like growing the business. So it was a pretty, it's just one of those things, again, getting back to Casey's like luck versus skill. It just was like, we were lucky that we played on the same softball team and happened to be good at softball, where we both played infield and I played third and he played short, right? And it's just like one of those weird serendipitous things that you just have to like grab those opportunities when they come.
I love that. I love that.
Yeah.
That was really nice.
Yeah, it is. I know, right?
You can tell me the bad. Yeah. Offline, you can tell me the bad things.
Yeah.
That's for the after the show episode.
Yeah.
Well, Casey,
Jerry Springer Culinary Chats. No.
Exactly.
I'm gonna do a couple shots of whiskey, and then I'll come back and just start ranting incoherently.
Some whiskey with some Ed and Carl's, right?
That's right, Ed and Carl.
Yeah.
There you go.
Well, so Casey, what is it about Dan that?
Tell me about me.
Successful.
Yeah. well, Dan, if you can't tell, he's just by his title on here. I mean, he always keeps it light. He always keeps it fun and funny, which is a great thing to always be around, because I think he has chilled me out a lot over the years, just being around him, because like, things go wrong all the time, in business and in life, really, and he always approaches it with just kind of humor and this like, what are you going to do attitude, that I think, not like we're just going to leave it alone, but like, what are you going to do other than just figure out how to fix it? Like, he doesn't get frazzled very easily. He's always kind of just like making light of the situation, seeing like the funny element of it. And I think that's a great thing to have in any partnership or just friendship in general. But more to Dan's point, about that starting relationship again, I was young and didn't, in my mind, I was like, why you want to partner with me too? Right. And I think we just had such complementary skills. I had that kind of marketing, sales, advertising, again, front of house mindset, whereas Dan had a very more finance driven, operational driven. He wasn't he didn't mind kind of taking a back seat when it came to like publicity, and I think that um helped us. And so I dragged him along for a lot of our, inside scoop videos and behind the scenes stuff. And, he's just like, come on, Dan, you're getting in here. But he also has never minded when I've just kind of done those things on my own or, gone on to the news station or something and go promote our business. And, he's aware that I'm probably the more comfortable one in front of the camera and has kind of let me run with that. And so I think, having him not have that ego piece, where I think that could be hard for people to feel like, I get all the credit because I'm just more extroverted at the end of the day and I'm just more in front of the camera and he's never been, because I do this,
Use your hands.
I just take his ideas, but I do this with my hands and then
I did
get the
this.
credit. No, and I'm not, I think people know that, there's two of us that are instrumental to the success of the business. But because I have been more of public facing, he's never been upset by that. And to his point, we have had a great relationship through the last 7 years, in terms of how we've been able to communicate with each other, how we've been able to work through any of those disagreements. And I think a lot of that comes down to, at its core, knowing that at the end of the day, we have the same goal. We both want to see this thing be successful. We both have the best interests of the business in mind. And so when we come to those, proverbial forks in the road where maybe we don't quite agree about something, it's never, we've always been able to just work through it by having a conversation and just each saying, expressing our point of view on the scenario and having a lot of respect for the other person's point of view. Right. Even if we don't ultimately agree with it, we at least come to the table and like, we have a lot of mutual respect and just trust in each other's, we kind of have this implicit division of tasks in our business, right? That I don't think we have ever explicitly communicated to each other, but it's like, we each know that the other person's going to do what they are responsible for. Like, I don't need to worry about Dan doing what he is going to do, what he's supposed to be taking care of. And he doesn't need to worry about me. And, we run a lot of things by each other, but we also trust each other to not run things by each other. If if it comes to like a marketing thing, usually he lets me run with, my skill set there. And if it comes to, making a spreadsheet or something, financial stuff behind, where that's his subject matter, I'm like, I trust you.
Be like, how much did that cost? How much did that cost? That's always fine.
Yeah. So I think it's, our relationship is built on a lot of trust and a lot of, just knowing that we each have the best interest of each other in the business at its heart. And I think, Dan complimented my hard work, but it's the same thing. I think having a business partner, to kind of share that load with, but also having the accountability of someone else who you don't want to let down because, again, like I've always felt like Dan really took a chance on me. I was a 25-year-old kid who didn't have a lot of experience, but I was willing to hustle my ass off. Right. Can I swear on this? I was willing to hustle,
Yeah.
and put in sweat equity as much as I possibly could, and I think that we've just always been able to have that open line of communication where we can trust each other, where we can, share our perspectives and know that like at the end of it, one of us is going to crack a joke and like, we're just going to keep moving right along. It helps that, to his point, we do have very similar worldviews in terms of, how we want to show up and treat each other and the kind of, environment we want to create. And last thing I'll say, and then I'll stop talking, but you asked previous question to this was like working in the business versus working on the business. And I think Dan's ultimately been instrumental in getting us more and more on the business and less in the business, because, one of my, I think it's a blessing and a curse, fatal flaw, right? Is like, I hate letting balls drop. I'll just, if something's not, it's like, and Dan's more on the side of like, hey, sometimes you got to let a ball drop, right? Sometimes you've got to have the global perspective of what's this going to look like when we get to 8 stores, when we get to 10 stores, when we have a store outside of the state, right? You can't do everything every time that a ball drops. So sometimes you have to get out of the business a little bit. It's one step back to take 2 steps forward, right? And I think that he came to the partnership and the business with that perspective right off the bat of, how do we get here as quickly as possible? Whereas if it were just
I'm
me
old.
here,
I got limited time. Angela.
More experience.
3 kids. He's like, I can't be.
I got 3
Yeah.
kids. I got to put them through school.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah, exactly. Whereas
Well,
like we would have moved much slower. So,
yeah. Well, I think when I listen to both of you speak, first of all, we'll have to get an excerpt. So this will be in your time capsule. So 10 years from now, you guys can go back and listen to this video and appreciate
when
Yeah,
we're in
funny.
court litigating. I was kidding.
Yeah. The race to the bank.
Right,
Who gets to the bank first?
But I think it's like you think yin and yang, you think of right brain, left brain, like, right. So literally that creativity and innovation that's coming from the right brain, Casey, it sounds like that's you, like the, kind of logistics, the thought processes and like that, right, coming from you, Dan, like, and they complement each other versus I think sometimes in collaborations and partnerships, whether it's, again, basketball, I use a lot of basketball analogies, when you have duplicative personas, it makes it really difficult, right? It's like you end up being in more confrontational energy, right? Then where you can complement each other and help each other grow and learn and develop. And that's what it sounds like, the synergy, right? That symbiotic relationship that's happening between you two. And I think it's a fantastic thing to observe from a distance for sure. Well, this has been awesome. Like, I know I'm savoring every morsel of insight that you both are sharing about, just being entrepreneurs, being in the culinary industry, what you're trying to build with your team and culture and those sorts of things. And I would love to kind of delve a little bit further into who you both are individually and collectively as the owners, the better owner and the owner
That's
of
right.
this and so we will be back here on Culinary Chats with Indulge Boise with our special guests today, Casey Allen and Dan Sell from The Still. And we'll be back with the final course here in a moment. All right. Well, welcome back to Culinary Chats. We are back here on Culinary Chats with Indulge Boise. I'm Angela Taylor, your host and the owner and Chief Indulge Officer of Indulge Boise. We're here with Casey Allen and Dan Sell, the co-owners of The Still. And we're here on the final course. The final course is just some quick thoughts that we have, just some insight that you may have about your career, the journey, the culinary industry, what's happening here in Boise and beyond. And so I guess I want to start with, for both of you, and Casey, we'll start with you, kind of what's a food first memory that you have, a moment from your past where food played the starring role in a really memorable experience? And I say that because I think that the impetus behind Indulge Boise was to bring people together, to connect people. And I felt like, over the last few years, we were getting disconnected in different communities, large and small. And food is the thing that's, for me, brings so many memories, whether it's at Thanksgiving or if it's just, out at dinner with friends and family or college, pizza in college. And so what's a food first memory that you have that is kind of etched in your mind?
Yeah. Well, the first thing I thought of and trying to tie it into The Still as well is my grandmother. She was, her signature dish was leg of lamb. And so I remember a lot of times spending in Twin Falls, which is where both my parents are from. Twin Falls and leg of lamb was kind of the, like, when the whole family was together. But she always had multiple pints of Haagen-Dazs coffee ice cream in her freezer.
Oh, wow.
And my grandma's house is, for me, it was Fruity Pebbles, it was donut holes, and it was Haagen-Dazs coffee ice cream. So I know when we started the still, one of my, you know, like one of my non-negotiables was like, we have to make a coffee ice cream that would make Grandma Joanne proud. But I always associate just kind of their tiny house in Twin Falls with like big family meals, and that was literally breakfast would be Fruity Pebbles, donut holes, and coffee ice cream. So that's kind of my initial thought on a food first memory.
That's pretty powerful food first memory. I can tell for sure. Dan, how about you?
Yes, I mean, there is always, it's funny how grandma pops in your head first. It's just like what grandma, my grandmother's chicken noodle soup, but I think I'm gonna go back. So my wife is a great cook, like awesome cook, and she likes to try different things. And one of the things when we first married, we were doing grilled pizzas, like, you know, taking dough and put it on the grill as opposed to cooking in the oven. And my family came over and we were making them. And for some reason, I don't know, like, because I was cooking it, because I was on the grill. It just took forever. But like sat out there and like I started, it was light out, and then by the time I got done, I had a flashlight. But my dad was out there the whole time, and we were just drinking beer and just chatting, and just like the power of food, right, to create connection, right? Because it is just like that communal aspect to just from from cooking to, to sitting down to eat. Um, that it's one of those things, like, and I'm experienced with my own kids. Like, there's when you're in your teenage years, like, you need your mom a lot, but like when you get in your 20s and you're married, like as a man, you need your dad. Like, it's great that your dad, I'm lucky enough that my dad is still around. Um, and just that, like, being able to reconnect with him, and that was just kind of a moment that is etched in my mind, where we kind of reconnected from as men, where I wasn't, this his kid anymore, right? He's like, I'm done, I got you here.
Yeah.
And like we could kind of reconnect as people.
That's
Yeah.
awesome. That's awesome. And
Yeah.
if I remember correctly, the first few weeks when you opened that store in 2017, was it your father that was working in the store?
No, it's Casey's.
My dad.
Was that your
Yeah.
dad?
He still
Yeah.
works.
He's
He
still
still does.
Does
Yeah.
he?
Yeah.
That is
He works
awesome.
over at our Harris Ranch location a couple days a
Yeah.
week. He always takes a winter hiatus, but
Yeah.
he's been doing it since we opened. So it's awesome.
That's very cool. I remember, like, again, coming into the store some of those opening days, and the pride, like, right,
Yeah.
the pride that he had
Oh,
and
yeah.
being involved. That's very cool that he's still working in the store.
He never hesitates to let us know how we need to fix things, which is awesome.
Well, you need somebody like that, right?
Oh,
You need
yeah.
somebody
Oh, yeah.
Well, as you
Okay.
need things, that leads to this next question. As you've been trying to come up with new flavors or flavor profiles or pairings, can you, either one of you can take this question, describe the most epic kitchen disaster, if you've had any, over the years, and if you've learned from it?
Where to
Like, you
start?
kind of those balls that drop, sometimes you learn in the moment that the ball is dropping.
Yeah.
Most
I don't
epic
know.
kitchen disaster. Do you have any specific ones that pop into your head, Dan? I mean, I know we've had a number of kitchen disasters, but
I mean, we've had compressors break. We've had like spilled, when ice cream mix spills, it's unbelievable. It's like an oil slick. Like, you can't. Yeah. And I'm
we've
trying
had
to
freezer doors. We've had freezer doors left ajar, so the
left
next day you
open.
show up and the
Yeah.
ice cream is soup.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. I mean,
Lots of product down
never
the
like,
drain.
yeah, because you're not like cooking things, so there's never like
Yeah,
usually
no
not the
fires.
risk of fire. No fire.
Okay.
Knock on wood. I mean, there's a lot of electricity, so I guess there is that, but it's more of these little, like, oh geez, oh Pete, well, like, can't like, just how hard is it to shut a freezer door, or how, but you always look back. I think Casey and I are always like, we put it back on us and be like, well, we've done our share of more than
Yeah.
done our share of dumb things. So it's like, you just kind of move
Yeah.
on from it. But it we've there's no like epic, fortunately, I guess. I mean, there was we've even had a van a driver flip a van on State Street. So it's like we've had our gamut of like interesting experiences, but never, nothing where it was like we had to shut everything down. Fortunately, we just were able
Yeah.
to continue operating.
Yeah. No, that's great.
Nothing too more like we look back and we think about some of the logistical things that we
Oh,
had
yeah.
to do, especially when we were, when we were early on and we had our maybe 150 square foot kitchen downtown that we were, running everything out of. There was some crazy, logistical things that were less than ideal. Yeah, we've moved a lot of equipment in some questionable ways over the time.
Yeah.
I can imagine.
Questionable to our own personal safety, I
Right.
should
No,
Somebody
that-
holding something on the back of a
Still-
truck bed or something
Hey,
like that.
Oh yeah,
Still under health department guidelines, though. We still held temperature.
Absolutely.
yes, of course.
The
More
method may have
dangerous
been
to our
questionable,
personal.
but
Well, a couple more questions. Dan, just thinking about kind of the evolution of the culinary scene here in Boise, just since 2017, if you will. And it feels like there's a new restaurant coming online all the time. Can you speak to, from your perspective, as a participant in the growth of the culinary industry, what do you see? What are you excited about with the culinary scene in Boise?
yeah. So I mean, growing up in Cleveland, there's obviously like Cleveland's actually one of the most diverse towns in terms of just different ethnicities and different like villages. So you get different kinds of food. And then I was fortunate enough to live in San Jose and be able to go up to San Francisco and see like a bunch of different cuisines I had never seen before, different Asian cuisines, different African cuisines. I'm kind of more or less excited just to see where Boise goes, because it's definitely I always tell people, like, if you're have a unique food concept, Boise's the place, because there's so many niches that have not been filled here, and variety, everything from like different fast casual concepts to just like general, all the way to the upscale. I do think that Boise's missing quite a bit of that mid-range, like unique mid-range. I think there's been a explosion of these higher end restaurants, right? But like people get families, with kids, and even like, business owners like Casey can't afford to go out and spend 200 bones on a dinner every weekend, So I think that lower mid-range unique concept, that opportunity is there. So I'm kind of excited to see where it goes. There's one of my newest, or that one of my favorite concepts that came out is the Puerto Rican restaurant in Garden City, Huepa.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, so good, so
Yeah.
good. Something that I hadn't had anywhere but
Yes.
here. So that I thought, that place is awesome. So places like that, I'm pretty excited about.
Yeah. So maybe you can find an ice cream with some plantains. That might
Yeah.
be right. That might be.
Yeah.
It's a great idea.
It actually is
Yeah.
Yeah, little flambéed
I like
banana
it.
plantain.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, and kind of speaking of that, just like the evolution and kind of these high-end restaurants and that niche, one of the things that's really surprised me when I moved back here and started Indulge was the sense of, like, in the culinary industry and all other places, it's so much competition. Like, right? It's like we're fighting for butts and seats. Same thing as in sports, right? With your Cleveland Cavaliers or whoever else, like, right? You're fighting for share of wallet. And as I was having conversation with owners, there was a competition, but there was also collaboration. And it felt different than it feels in other markets. So Casey, like, this co-opetition is what I like to call it. And one of your colleagues, the College of Idaho, with Chris Kamori, the first James Beard winner from Idaho, talks a lot about that, how important it is to be able to collaborate with others, to source ingredients locally and that sort of thing. Like, what is your sense of the co-opetition? I see the stills pints in different restaurants, around the city.
Yeah.
How important is that to you and your brand?
Yeah, I love the coined term there. I think it's, we've been so fortunate to benefit from folks that, have been in the industry before us, and so many people were so willing to share their knowledge. A special shout out, Brad Walker at Boise Fry Company was very helpful to us in our initial push to get open, and we've met so many great operators through this whole experience. And so yeah, it is interesting. You know, I'm born and raised Boise. I've lived here my whole life, so I don't have the benefit of being able to compare it to other areas. You know, this is the only place I've operated, but I do agree with you that it is a very cooperative environment. You know, everyone kind of supports everyone. Everyone's willing to share experiences. You know, everyone is trying to highlight how much local ingredients they're using or local products. They're, you know, all their local partners, us included. You know, we work with a ton of local producers and vendors and businesses to try to highlight them as well. And I think that that's part of, you know, part of the value of Boise is, you know, it does have that very nice, right? Boise nice. And so we can all collaborate and kind of promote one another. And I think that as our audience has grown, as well as our reach and our audience has grown, we've felt like it's, you know, to some degree, an obligation for us to highlight those businesses that are kind of on the come up, right? And kind of give them shout outs and highlight that, hey, we're partnering with these folks, or we're using their products, and, you know, go support them as well. Because at the end of the day, you know, all of us that are business owners, entrepreneurs, like, we know like how difficult it can be, how, you know, all the hurdles that you encounter along the way, and how it can be a lonely path at times, right? And so just kind of, you know, we're fortunate to be in the midst of that, and have developed some great friendships and relationships along the way of other people that are trying to do the same thing we're doing, which is just create a space for the community to hopefully enjoy their time together, because that's ultimately what food and drink and our type of establishment is for people to come together, enjoy the sweetest things in their lives, right, with the sweetest people in their lives. And so being able to highlight other folks that are doing good work in the Valley, and them kind of highlight us, is really important, and it's cool to be a part of and see.
That's awesome. Well, Casey, and you can probably, with your marketing front of the house kind of perspective on this, I'll throw this one to you. But are there any upcoming projects that we all should be on the lookout for? Where can our viewers here on YouTube find all about the still?
Sure. Yeah. So there are a couple upcoming projects that we probably can't fully talk about yet, but hey, that's a little teaser to maybe go check out our Instagram and website, ilovethestill.com, or on Instagram at I Love the Still, Facebook / I Love the Still, all those things. But yeah, we're in those 5 locations that we talked about earlier. So 3 locations in Boise, 1 in Nampa, 1 in Caldwell. We are slated to be part of the Casino Beach development going in Garden City, right there, 34th Street on the Greenbelt. And a couple other potential locations coming up in the next year as well. But other than that, just, you know, give us a try, go enjoy some ice cream with your loved ones, and take a moment to reflect, you know, not be in a rush, and just ultimately enjoy a sweet treat with your favorite people at any of our locations. And if you run into either of us around town, we're always at coffee shops or restaurants, or just hanging around. Don't be afraid to say hi, because, you know, we love meeting people who enjoy what we do, and hopefully we can connect with more people.
Awesome. Fantastic. Well, anytime you want to drop the latest news, feel free to
we'll let you know first. Yeah.
Let us know first. But Casey and Dan, this has been awesome. I could be in conversation with you both for another hour. So just appreciate you sharing your story, the journey, the work that you are all doing in this community, and as you're building the still and the enterprise, and treating us all to the sweetest things in life, as we do connect with the sweetest people that are in our lives as well. So appreciate both of you for joining us for a little food for thought and conversation for the soul here on Culinary Chats with Indulge Boise.
Well, thanks so much for having us. It was awesome.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Great.
Absolutely.
Great time.
Absolutely. Well, that was another episode of Culinary Chats with Indulge Boise. I'm your host, Angela Taylor. Again, appreciate being joined by Casey Allen and Dan Sell from The Still. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure that you hit that subscribe button here on YouTube. Make sure that you
down there
here, just right
over
there,
there.
here, somewhere around there.
Somewhere around there.
Absolutely, right? Got to get these directional signs going. But so you were the first to hear about some of our latest episodes. And hey, who knows? Maybe Casey and Dan will be back with news about some new ventures that they have ahead. But we have some great conversations here on Culinary Chats, and appreciate all of the amazing people that are part of the culinary industry here in Idaho for doing the work that they're doing. So again, for our team at Indulge Boise, I'm Angela Taylor, your host for Culinary Chats with Indulge Boise. Thanks once again for joining us.
Hey, I'm Casey, this is Dan, and we just finished up recording with Angela Taylor on the podcast Culinary Chats by Indulge Boise, and had a great time, and would highly recommend that if you're interested, if you are being approached to be on the show, definitely recommend it. Angela, as you probably know, is a fantastic conversationalist, made us feel comfortable, and yeah, we had a great time chatting with her. So definitely recommend it.
Yeah, definitely recommend. It's nice to look back, like being able to like when you're on these entrepreneurial journeys, you're like, oh man, have I done anything? And then you talk with someone like Angela, who's pretty great at kind of pulling it out and been like, oh man, we've actually accomplished some stuff. So that's pretty good.
I guess we have come a little ways.
Yeah. So maybe if you want to feel better about yourself, talk to Angela, because it's a lot of fun.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun, and yeah, she definitely had a great way of making us look a lot smarter and more successful than we probably actually are. So
yeah,
recommend doing an interview and being part of Culinary Chats. Hey guys, I'm Casey. This is Dan. We are the co-founders and co-owners of The Still, and coming up, we will be joining Angela Taylor from Indulge Boise Food Tours on her brand new show, Culinary Chats by Indulge Boise. So give it a listen, check us out, and you can hear more about The Still and our journey from not knowing anything about ice cream to now having just opened our 5th store in Nampa. So hopefully you'll give us a listen and
very
enjoy
exciting.
The show.
Catch us on YouTube. I think she's gonna have it on YouTube. We'll post the link on our Instagram, the Insta. So check it out. Give it a listen.
Yes. So catch us on Culinary Chats, and hope you enjoy the episode.